Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is the Happymodel Crux 3-inch drone. I have never flown it before, but it is a beautiful day here in the Pacific Northwest, and so I'm going to enjoy the weather and try this thing out and share my initial impressions with all of you. Here is the drone up close, and if it looks familiar, it should, because this formula is basically a Babytooth. The Babytooth was developed by Kebab FPV, Bob Ruge. He also developed the toothpick and kind of made this whole category popular. But with the Babytooth, which was a 3-inch 1S build, I love that thing. You've seen it on this channel before. But he developed this motor size, which is 1202.5. That was his motor size. I think he even worked with Jim Fan to develop these 3018 two-blade props. So credit goes to Bob Ruge for sure. And I don't think there's any question Happymodel is trying to make a bind and fly to capitalize on that popularity. But it's not exactly the same because this is a 2S drone with lower KV. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out with Happymodel's version of this popular formula. Just so you know, this drone was given to me for free by Banggood, but I assure you they have not paid me. Nobody has ever paid me to make a video, and nobody gets to control the content of my videos except for me. Here's another drone you may have seen on this channel. This one is the original Babytooth frame, and it's got the FPV cycle motors. Happens to be the 13mm motor, so they're updated. And this is also a 2S, so the formula of this one is really similar to what Happymodel is flying on here. The drone came with this TPU mount for the Insta360 GO, so I figured I'd try it out with that on there. I'll show you both the HD and the FPV footage. But bear in mind that the Insta360 GO weighs like 20 grams, and so the performance of this thing is presumably going to be a lot better if you were to take that off. This obviously is not going to be a detailed review. I'm flying this for the first time. I don't have any experience with it yet, so I don't know how it's going to turn out. But if you stick around after the flight footage, I'll give you some of my initial impressions of this drone. So with that out of the way, let's go fly. Oh man, this thing is not very heavy, but when it hit that bench, it rung like a gong. And I completely lost video in the FPV, as you saw. And so that was the end of that flight. Let's check for damage. The frame looks totally okay. The arms are still nice and stiff. Motors seem fine. Everything seems fine except for my poor crossfire antenna, which is right here. And I was going to complain about this just by looking at it. They had these things flopping out the back, and it's just taped onto this arm with just these loose crossfire antennas. That is just asking to get chopped up. And sure enough, it got chopped right here. Probably got bent up in the crash and then got chopped. I am back at the house now, and there's just a few more things I want to show you before we wrap up. First of all, you can see how I fixed that crossfire antenna. This is the Mini Mortal T antenna, and I've just got it taped on there. And this was actually really easy to fix because the nano receiver is right down here. All I had to do was slit some of the heat shrink on that, and I was able to replace that antenna. I didn't even have to open it up. So that was pretty easy. If you have this drone, I would recommend the same thing. I don't know how these antennas compare in range to the other loose wire antenna, but as far as durability, it's a major upgrade. I'm not sure how they mount the antennas on the FR Sky version of the drone. It might be something like this. If not, I suggest you use some zip ties. That's usually what I do for those kind of antennas, and it works really well. Other than that, I've been pretty happy with this build. It flies a lot like a Babytooth, except on 2S. Seems reasonably well put together, and the parts are pretty well spec'd out. Even the FPV camera is decent. This is the Kedix Ant camera, and I've used that in several of my own builds. It's pretty cheap and pretty light for what it is, and so I think that was a good choice. Now, the video transmitter is built into the flight controller. That's another thing that's interesting about this drone. You can see this little, looks like copper wire coming out. That is a monopole antenna, and that's all it has for an FPV antenna. So the picture was actually decent as long as I was very close and no obstacles in the way, no trees blocking the signal or anything like that. But when I got farther away, I was definitely getting breakup on the FPV signal. And that was on 200 milliwatt output. So I think this antenna is probably part of the issue with that. If it had a separate antenna where the active element was farther away from the board, then I suspect it would do better in that respect. But I haven't replaced this antenna yet, so I can't tell you exactly how that would work out. And then this TPU mount on top is optional. Of course, you don't have to use it, but it did come in the box. And it's designed to hold the Insta360 GO camera, just like that, if you happen to have one. This is not the Insta360 GO 2. This is the original Insta360 GO. So it records at 25 frames per second. That's why the HD footage doesn't always look as smooth as you might like, but the image stabilization in this camera is pretty sweet. So it's cool that it can go on there, but I was pretty disappointed in the amount of jello that I got in this footage. And I'm wondering if some of that could come from this mount. I've got one zip tie, which is what really holds it on there. I'm wondering if a second one would make it more rigid. I'm not sure. But it's kind of interesting because I didn't hear any excessive amount of vibration like in the prop's sound that would have affected the flight performance. And I didn't see any in the FPV video. That doesn't mean it wasn't there. It could have been there, and it's just the difference in shutter speed made it appear in the HD and not in the FPV. That's possible. But it's also possible that this mount was kind of amplifying some of those vibrations. Overall, I'd say it flew pretty well. It came with a tune on it, so I didn't change any of that. I think it was Betaflight 422. But I just put on my modes, OSD, and mode switches. Otherwise, this is exactly the way that it comes, and it flew pretty smooth, so no complaints about that, and it was pretty quiet. I would have recorded audio, but you just get the tractors and the wind and stuff in the background most of the time unless I'm flying close, and so it's pretty smooth and quiet. It's no powerhouse, though. I was on full throttle at several points, even just pulling out a little power loops. I needed full throttle a lot of the time. But part of it is also just because I've got this 20-gram camera weighing it down as well. I expect that this thing would be a little rocket without that extra weight. And so I look forward to flying this some more. I hope this has been helpful for you. If it is, you can let me know down in the comments section, or if you've got questions, be happy to talk about that. So thanks for watching to the end of this video, and I'll see you next time.